Well arrived, my gremlins. Today is Friday. We are starting the weekend. It's September the 23rd. And to your attention, I shall bring that this day, 133 years ago, Fusajiro Yamauchi started a company known as Nintendo Koppai, also currently known as Nintendo. Back then, it was made to produce and market Hanafuda cards. You know, the Asian style cards that you might have seen in some Korean or Chinese or Japanese form of media. Those cards, that's what Nintendo was intended for. And they still make it today, for the record. Not just video games and consoles, they actually still make these cards in Japan. What, however, unlike Nintendo, Blizzard is doing is continuing to add new things to the beta of Dragonflight for our upcoming expansion. And there are a few interesting things to point out. Not just even more balance changes and balance tuning that we keep going over every day. We just checked yesterday a whole bunch of balance changes for the specs and classes. Today we have a few more interesting things, some of which are still part of the endgame activities, because there is a few things related to Mythic Plus, for example, the affixes in Mythic Plus, or the crafting and the obtaining of your gear in Dragonflight, that are quite interesting to go over. So let's go to the first two, more important ones. The first one is this thing right here. I'm gonna show you picture number 1, and then I'm gonna show you picture number 2. As you can see, picture number 1 is slightly different than picture number 2. It has a different background, it has a different icon. Now the question is, this is the UI for the Creation Catalyst. Why would Blizzard change in the beta of Dragonflight the UI for the Creation Catalyst? And this brings us back to one of the many interviews that the developers released back during the Q&A period of the announcement of Dragonflight, where Ion Azikostas was asked about the Creation Catalyst. What are your plans for systems that you thought were working in Shadowlands that you might think about bringing in Dragonflight? And Ion was saying, the Creation Catalyst is one of them. It did work. Players were happy with it. They were quite happy with being able to have this sort of safe net mechanism for crafting their tier sets, given the importance of a tier set in Season 3 and Season 4 of Shadowlands. Ion says that they probably don't want to get into the habit of having to reinvent a new tool, a new excuse every zone with some magical currency that is there, that exists just to craft tier sets or whatever from that patch. He was saying, and this was like 2 months ago, we are still figuring out exactly how this will work, but I think that professions, this is an interesting point, professions are actually probably a really good long-term home for that sort of device, where, over the course of a tier, after a few weeks of collecting, long-term still, but what if you could take your plate helm that you earned from your raid or your Mythic Plus run and take it to a skilled blacksmith with a reagent who can then make that into a set helm? That's the sort of thing we would love to carry forward. So that is the point that connects us to this background and icon change for the Creation Catalyst in the beta. Creation Catalyst is in Zerth Mortis, is for Sepulchre of the first ones, is for the last expansion, yet it's getting updated, and we have gotten a quite clear statement from Ion that they intend to carry over this extra help in itemizing your characters, in not falling behind with some of the RNG elements of the gear, because even though plenty of our power in Dragonflight will be in the talent system, so there is not going to be much borrowed power for you to miss out on. However, we do know that things like tier sets, for example, are going to exist in Dragonflight. So this could be a good thing, a good addition to Dragonflight to keep the Creation Catalyst, even though likely, perhaps, it's going to be maybe at a nerfed state. Maybe it's going to take a little bit longer to allow this to happen compared to what to how it worked in Shadowlands. Still, it's good news. It's good news that we now have it's not a confirmation, I don't want to jinx it, but a much more strong point, a much more strong case towards having the Catalyst exist in Dragonflight. This was the first part of our endgame / competitive set of news. The other one is about Mythic Plus, because we already had the affixes added into the beta. Remember that if you're not in the beta, like me, unfortunately, the Mythic Plus is still not available, it's still not testable. It's not that you can see what's going on in Mythic Plus right now in the beta. However, you can still check what's in the database, what is actually in the beta build, whether or not it's put into the game or not. We already knew, for example, that Tyrannical and Fortified were added to the game version, so they are likely still gonna be there in Dragonflight. We also got the addition of the Mythic Plus dungeons for Dragonflight. This is also something we already knew. The 4 selected, out of the 8 available, the 4 selected Dragonflight dungeons plus the older dungeons that we talked about a few days ago. For Dragonflight, it was the Ruby Life Pools, the Knockout Offensive, the Azure Vault, and the Algethar's Academy, and then the old ones that we knew before were Court of Stars and Temple of the Jade Serpent. So from Legion and Mists, and then the 2 newly added we got to know a few days ago were Halls of Valor and Shadow Moon Boreal Grounds. Those were added into the beta build, even though they're still not available themselves. However, the interesting part is that what was also added as a string to these dungeons was Display Season ID. As being part of the first season of Dragonflight were also the affixes. So I'm going to show you this right now. Take in mind, as I said already, that Tyrannical and Fortified are already in the game, and these were the new affixes added to Dragonflight. Now, take a look at this list. What's going on in this list? Isn't there something wrong in this list? It's not quite what you remember. What is this? The names here are too short. There should be more of these affixes. What's going on? Necrotic and Inspiring are missing from the affixes being added in the beta of Dragonflight at the moment. I don't want to say anything more because I don't want to jinx it. It might be just a very mean-spirited forgetfulness of the developers to not have put Inspiring and Necrotic, so maybe in the next couple of days they are like, oops, sorry guys, we forgot about these 2 wonderful affixes. Or maybe it's intended. Maybe it's actually planned to get rid of Inspiring and Necrotic. Now, what's interesting also is that there is actually no new affix whatsoever. Of course, there is going to be the seasonal affix, so the first season of Dragonflight will have its own new affix, just like what we get every season. However, it is interesting that there is no brand new affix to become part of the pool. We have got them pretty much every expansion, from Legion into BFA to BFA into Shadowlands. We were getting different set of new affixes, getting into Mythic Plus, and for now we don't have anything new in Dragonflight. There has also been quite a few times significant changes to the affixes. You know, when we went from BFA to Shadowlands, many affixes were nerfed. Many affixes were made much less annoying. Bursting, for example, became dispellable. It started doing damage based on a fixed amount rather than doing a percentage of your max HP damage. You had things like Sanguine that started disappearing over time. But for now we have none of that. Perhaps also to show how behind we are in the testing, that just now we get the affixes even just in the database of the beta, not even in the game, not even testable. And even with these being in the database itself, nothing has changed. There is no new ones, there is no balance tuning done to the affixes. The only thing we can gauge from this is that perhaps, maybe, there is a chance that Inspiring and Necrotic want to be part of the next season of Mythic Plus. I'm not going to ask you your thoughts about this. I doubt there are going to be many players debating for the staying of these 2 affixes. They are, generally speaking, 2 of the more, if not the most annoying affixes to deal with in terms of time consuming, in terms of the amount of time you have to just waste dealing with the affixes or the annoyance they bring to the tank, for example, with Necrotic. So I don't think if they were to leave us, I don't think many players will lament their disappearance, honestly. Talking about talents themselves, there is something for Priest. I don't want to go again, okay, I don't want to go again too much into Priest. Every fucking video I have to talk about Priest because the devs keep changing Priest. Just 1 minute, just once again, because there is more changes to Shadow Priest. The developers let another wall of text to communicate with the priests some of their decisions that were put forward in the previous dev talk with Priest, which was embarrassing. It was terrible. Now they are saying, don't worry. I mean, you have to worry still, but don't worry about this particular thing, which is Power Word Life and Mind Games. We touched on the possibility of removing Power Word Life and Mind Games because supposedly Priest had too many buttons, and now we won't. Fine, we are keeping Power Word Life and Mind Games into the trees. They are, however, removing Shadowmend. Shadowmend will be replaced with a Flesh Heal talent to improve Flesh Heal, but Shadowmend will be gone in Dragonflight. Also, Mind Suit gets honestly buffed. Mind Suit get a 5-second cooldown, but now it has a 12-yard radius AoE. So you can now multi-target Carpet Bomb, Mind Suit on a whole pack in Mythic Plus. So I think it's pretty good. It's a pretty good change, since that's basically what you were using Mind Suit for the skips in Mythic Plus, and now it's made better because you can target multiple targets at the same time in an AoE radius, so it's just a better utility now for Mythic Plus. There is barely any changes to Discipline for now. There is, however, a significant change to Holy, because Answered Prayers has been nerfed significantly. Answered Prayers was the 2 rank talent, which made you get into Apotheosis for 8 seconds every time your Prayer of Mending healed 50 times. Blizzard is now carpet bomb nerfing this talent, because number 1, triggering Apotheosis with this talent is not going to reset the cooldown of Holy War Salvation and Holy War Serenity. That's what Apotheosis does. When you have the talent and you click Apotheosis, you reset your 2 Holy War spells for healing. Now, if you trigger Apotheosis with this talent, you won't get that very powerful effect. Number 2, casting Holy Word, Sanctify, and Holy War Serenity while Holy War Salvation is on cooldown. So if you're triggering Apotheosis with this talent while your actual Apotheosis is still on cooldown, you will not reduce the cooldown of Holy War Salvation by an increased amount. So, pretty much the 2 most powerful things that you would have wanted Answered Prayers for got nerfed. The funny thing is that at the end of this discussion, the Blizzard dev says, the talent has been met with a great deal of positivity, and we are equally excited. Yes, but the positivity was because of those 2 things that you just removed. So now it won't be met with positivity because it's much weaker. I'm disappointed in this change for Holy. Shadow gets a whole bunch of changes, none of which are too particularly interesting. We also already covered some of these changes, like the change to Mind Flay Insanity, the change to the cooldown of Dark Ascension. All these things we have already pointed out. So there isn't really anything worth going over for Shadow Priest, at least for now. Lastly, we can finish in a more casual, in a more collector style by pointing out the new mounts for the Draktyr. Yes, of course, Draktyrs are pseudo-drakes, they have wings and they can fly. Why would they need a mount? Because every single race in the game has got some racial mounts, because there are going to be some ground mounts only places where you can't fly, so you might as well give the Draktyr a mount as well, which is this thing right here. It's a Vorkin, a new type of stag/horse mix that is going to be available in Dragonflight. That is the new mount for the Draktyr. Now, with this last bit of casual news, we are done for today. We have looked, in my opinion, at the most important part of the news, the possibility, not quite real confirmation, of the Creation Catalyst coming back for your tier set acquisition in Dragonflight, followed by another important thing, the possibility, hoping, that Inspiring and Necrotic won't be part of the Mythic Plus affix pool in the first season of Dragonflight. Still waiting for any further changes to the affix pool of Dragonflight Mythic Plus. And then we have further developer communication for the Priest players, not too positive still, to be fair. And then lastly, on a more lighter note, the new mounts for the Draktyr. So, for this Friday, we are done. There's nothing more to talk about for today. I'm sure there's going to be way more stuff to talk about in the next few days, perhaps going a little bit more in depth into detail in some of the changes to the classes and specs that they received in these last couple of days. However, for now, I am going to leave you to the rest of the start of your weekend, according to some. Weekend starting late Friday evening is when the weekend starts, according to experts. So, we are leaving each other now. Thanks as usual to all of my patrons for supporting me. You are helping me continue to produce content for WoW, even in these trying times where I don't have the beta, and making content would be much easier if I did have the beta, but that is how the HR department of Blizzard works, so tough luck. Also, you can support myself and this channel by liking and commenting down below on this video, of course, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. That's always helpful. And lastly, for more social interactions, you can follow me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon right to the left, I believe, of the screen on these 2 links. Thanks, of course, as usual, for watching, guys. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, I will make one, by the way. When I get my hands on a beta key, I will get my long-awaited rage video at Blizzard, because this is embarrassing, honestly. Quite embarrassing.